My mother-in-law kidnapped my daughter because I caught her stealing from us. Me, 32F, and my husband Jake, 35M, have been married for 8 years. We have 2 kids, Emma, 7F, and Liam, 5M. We've had our ups and downs like any couple, but overall, our marriage has been pretty solid. That is until my mother-in-law, Diane, 61F, came into the picture. Diane has always been a bit of a control freak, but ever since my father-in-law passed away a few years ago, she's become unbearable. She's constantly criticizing the way we raise our kids, the way I keep the house, and even the way I dress. Jake tries to stand up for me, but he's always been a bit of a mama's boy, and Diane has a way of manipulating him to get what she wants. About 6 months ago, Diane started showing up at our house unannounced, sometimes multiple times a week. She'd let herself in with a spare key we gave her for emergencies and start going through our things, rearranging the furniture, and even throwing out items she deemed clutter. At first, we tried to brush it off, thinking she was just trying to help out. But it quickly became clear that she was overstepping her boundaries and trying to assert control over our lives. We had a talk with her and asked her to stop coming over without permission, but she brushed us off and said she was just trying to help. Things really came to a head a few weeks ago when I discovered that Diane had been stealing money from us. It started with small amounts here and there, but eventually, I noticed that larger sums were going missing from our joint account. I confronted Jake about it, and he didn't believe me at first. He thought I must have miscalculated or forgotten about some expenses. But then I showed him the bank statements, and he couldn't deny that something was off. We started keeping a closer eye on our finances and realized that the money was disappearing every time Diane came over. We felt violated and betrayed, but we didn't want to accuse her without proof. So, we set up a hidden camera in the living room, and sure enough, we caught her red-handed. On the footage, we saw her going through our drawers and taking cash from our wallets and purses. We were furious, but we decided to confront Diane calmly and give her a chance to explain herself. We invited her over for dinner and sat her down in the living room. "Mom, we need to talk to you about something serious," Jake said. "We've noticed that money has been going missing from our house, and we have evidence that you've been taking it." Diane denied it at first, but when we showed her the video footage, she couldn't deny it any longer. "I can't believe you're accusing me of stealing," Diane shouted. "After everything I've done for you ungrateful brats." "Mom, this isn't about gratitude," Jake said, trying to stay calm. "What you did was wrong, and we need you to admit it and stop." "I'm your mother," Diane yelled. "I have a right to whatever I want from you." We were stunned by her sense of entitlement and complete lack of remorse. "Mom, you don't have a right to steal from us," Jake said, his voice shaking with emotion. "That money is for our kids, for their future. How could you do something like this?" Diane scoffed and rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Like you two know how to handle money properly. I was just taking what was rightfully mine." I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. She truly believed that she was entitled to our money, simply because she was Jake's mother. "That's it," I said, my blood boiling. "You need to leave, and you're not welcome back until you can apologize and promise to never do something like this again." Diane stood up, her eyes narrowed at me. "You don't get to tell me what to do, you little bitch. This is my son's house, and I'll come and go as I please." Jake stepped in front of me, trying to shield me from his mother's wrath. "Mom, that's enough. You need to go now." Diane refused to leave, and the situation quickly escalated. She started throwing things around the living room, knocking over lamps and vases. Jake tried to restrain her, but she lashed out, scratching his face and drawing blood. I called the police, terrified that things would only get worse. When they arrived, Diane was still in a rage, screaming obscenities and threatening us. They had no choice but to arrest her for domestic violence and trespassing. As the police were leading Diane away, she turned to us and spat, "This isn't over. You'll regret this, you ungrateful brats." We were shaken but relieved that she was gone, at least for the time being. We didn't sleep much that night, worried about what she might do next. The next morning, we woke up to find that our car tires had been slashed, and someone had spray-painted obscenities on the garage door. We knew it was Diane, or someone she had hired, trying to make good on her threat. Over the next few weeks, the harassment continued. We received threatening phone calls and letters, and someone even tried to break into our house while we were away. We installed a security system and started looking into getting a restraining order against Diane. But the worst was yet to come. One day, I went to pick up Emma from school, and she wasn't there. The teachers told me that a woman claiming to be her grandmother had come and picked her up early. We immediately called the police and reported Emma as a missing child. They sprang into action, issuing an Amber Alert and launching a massive search. Thankfully, Emma was found safe and sound a few hours later. Diane had taken her to a hotel, intending to keep her there until we agreed to drop the charges against her. Diane was arrested and charged with kidnapping, among other charges. She was held without bail, pending trial. The legal battle that followed was long and exhausting. Diane's lawyers tried to paint her as a loving grandmother who had made a mistake, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. In the end, she was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 10 years in prison. The judge even went so far as to call her a danger to society and recommended that she undergo psychological evaluation and treatment. While we were relieved that justice had been served, the emotional toll of Diane's actions was immense. Emma was traumatized by the kidnapping and had nightmares for months afterward. Jake and I went to counseling to help us cope with the betrayal and abuse we had suffered at the hands of someone who was supposed to love and protect us. It was a long and difficult road, but slowly, we started to heal. We learned to set firm boundaries and cut toxic people out of our lives, no matter how much it hurt. Looking back, I realized that Diane's behavior was a product of her own narcissism and sense of entitlement. She saw us as extensions of herself, rather than autonomous individuals with our own lives and rights. While I'll never fully understand what drove her to such extreme actions, I've learned that some people are simply too toxic to have in your life, no matter their relation to you. Family isn't always blood, sometimes, it's the people who love and support you unconditionally. If you're dealing with a toxic family member, my advice is to set firm boundaries and seek help if they refuse to respect them. No one deserves to be abused or taken advantage of, not even by their own family. Break story 2. Me, 28F, and my husband, 30M, had been married for 5 years. We've had our ups and downs, but overall, our relationship has been pretty solid. That is, until my mother-in-law, 55F, came into the picture. From the moment we got engaged, she made it clear that she didn't approve of me. According to her, I wasn't good enough for her precious son. She constantly criticized my appearance, my career choices, and even the way I kept our home. Nothing I did was ever good enough in her eyes. Despite her constant nagging and disapproval, I tried my best to maintain a cordial relationship with her for my husband's sake. He's an only child, and his father passed away when he was a teenager, so she's all the family he has left. About a year ago, my mother-in-law's gambling addiction resurfaced. She had struggles with it in the past, but we thought she had it under control. Little did we know, she had been secretly squandering her life savings at the casino. When my husband found out, he was devastated. He tried to reason with her and even offered to help her seek professional help, but she refused to listen. Instead, she turned her attention to us, claiming that we were the ones causing her stress and making her gamble. One day, while my husband was at work, my mother-in-law showed up at our doorstep, demanding money. She said she needed it to get back on her feet and promised to pay us back once she won big at the casino. I politely refused, explaining that we couldn't enable her addiction. That's when she snapped. She started hurling insults at me, calling me names and accusing me of trying to turn her son against her. In the heat of the moment, she confessed that she had been stealing from us for months. She had been taking small amounts of cash from our wallets and even pawned off some of my jewelry to fund her gambling habit. I was stunned. All this time, I had trusted her and welcomed her into our home, and she had been stealing from us. The betrayal felt like a knife to the heart. When my husband came home, I immediately told him what had happened. He was furious, but not entirely surprised. He had suspected his mother's erratic behavior was due to her gambling addiction, but he never imagined she would stoop so low as to steal from her own family. We decided to confront her together, hoping that a united front would make her see reason and seek the help she desperately needed. We invited my mother-in-law over for dinner, thinking a neutral setting might help keep tempers in check. As soon as she walked through the door, the tension was palpable. My husband wasted no time in addressing the elephant in the room. He laid out all the evidence we had gathered, the missing cash, the pawned jewelry, and her own confession. He pleaded with her to get professional help and offered to support her through the process. But instead of showing remorse or gratitude, she doubled down on her lies and accusations. She denied ever stealing from us and claimed that I had set her up to turn her son against her. The situation quickly escalated. My mother-in-law started screaming and throwing things around our living room. She called me every name in the book and accused me of poisoning her son's mind against her. My husband tried to reason with her, But she was beyond listening. She was consumed by her addiction and her own delusions. In a fit of rage, she grabbed a vase off the mantelpiece and hurled it at me. Thankfully, I managed to dodge it, but the vase shattered against the wall, leaving shards of glass everywhere. That's when my husband had had enough. He told his mother to leave and never come back until she got help. Undeterred, my mother-in-law continued her tirade, spewing venom and threats as my husband ushered her out of our home. She swore that she would make us pay for turning against her and that we would regret the day we ever crossed her. As soon as she was gone, I broke down in tears. I had always tried to be understanding and patient with her, but her actions had crossed a line. Not only had she stolen from us, but she had also put my safety at risk by throwing that vase. My husband held me close, apologizing profusely for his mother's behavior. He promised that he would do whatever it took to protect me and our family from her toxicity. Over the next few days, my mother-in-law bombarded us with endless calls and text messages, ranging from pleas for forgiveness to outright threats. She even showed up at our house a few times, banging on the door and screaming at us to let her in. We had no choice but to call the police and file a restraining order against her. The officer who took our statement was sympathetic, having dealt with similar situations involving gambling addictions and family disputes. With the restraining order in place, we finally had some peace of mind. But the emotional toll of the whole ordeal was far from over. Despite the restraining order, my mother-in-law's harassment didn't stop. She would leave menacing voicemails and send threatening emails, accusing us of ruining her life and vowing to make us pay. One night, we came home to find our front door vandalized with obscene graffiti. The words traitors and thieves were scrawled across the wood, along with some more unsavory insults directed at me. We immediately called the police, but by the time they arrived, my mother-in-law was long gone. The officers dusted for fingerprints and promised to increase patrols in our neighborhood, but the damage had already been done. We no longer felt safe in our own home. The harassment continued for weeks, with my mother-in-law finding new and increasingly disturbing ways to torment us. She would leave bags of garbage on our doorstep, scratch obscenities into the paint of our car, and even leave dead animals on our porch as a twisted form of revenge. We tried our best to carry on with our lives, but the constant fear and stress were taking a toll on our mental health. My husband started having panic attacks, and I could barely sleep at night, constantly worried that his mother would try to break in or harm us in some way. It got to the point where we were considering moving, just to get away from the nightmare our lives had become. But just when we thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. One night, we woke up to the sound of shattering glass and our smoke detectors blaring. We rushed out of our bedroom to find our living room engulfed in flames. Thankfully, we managed to get out of the house safely, but the damage was extensive. The fire department later determined that the fire had been intentionally set, and the evidence pointed to my mother-in-law as the culprit. We were devastated. Not only had she put our lives in danger, but she had also destroyed our home and everything we owned. It was a clear act of retaliation, and we knew we had to take legal action before someone got seriously hurt. With the help of our lawyer, we pressed charges against my mother-in-law for arson, vandalism, and stalking. The evidence against her was overwhelming, including security camera footage of her lurking around our property on the night of the fire. She was arrested and initially denied all charges, claiming we had framed her in an attempt to take away her freedom. But as the trial progressed and more evidence was presented, her lies began to unravel. In the end, she was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 5 years in prison. The judge also ordered her to undergo mandatory counseling and treatment for her gambling addiction. While we were relieved that justice had been served, the legal battle took a heavy emotional and financial toll on us. We had to dip into our savings to cover the legal fees and the cost of rebuilding our home. But even with my mother-in-law behind bars, the trauma of her actions lingered. We struggled with trust issues and constantly felt like we were walking on eggshells, afraid that she or someone else might try to harm us again. It was a long and difficult road to recovery, but we were determined to move forward and rebuild our lives. The emotional aftermath of my mother-in-law's actions was perhaps the most challenging part of the ordeal. My husband struggled with feelings of guilt and self-blame, wondering if he could have done more to help his mother before things spiraled out of control. I, on the other hand, was left with a deep sense of mistrust and anxiety. Every time someone knocked on the door or a car pulled up outside, I would tense up, fearing that it was my mother-in-law or one of her enablers coming to terrorize us again. We sought counseling to help us work through our trauma and learn to trust again. It was a long and arduous process, but with time and patience, we slowly began to heal. Looking back, It's hard to believe how far my mother-in-law's addiction and delusions had taken her. She was once a loving and caring woman, but her gambling addiction turned her into someone we barely recognized. While the legal and emotional aftermath of her actions will always be a part of our lives, we've learned to move forward and focus on the good things we have. We've built a stronger, more resilient relationship, and we've surrounded ourselves with a supportive network of friends and family who have our backs. If there's one lesson we've learned from this ordeal, it's the importance of setting boundaries and prioritizing our mental health and safety. We may have lost our material possessions, but we gained a newfound appreciation for what truly matters in life, each other.